So, for the last year, I've been deeply invested in Critical Role. I watched every episode of Campaign 2, watched every talks that I could, and just all around supported everything that they're doing. And I've always wanted to give back to the community somehow, because I've definitely spent hours just looking through fan art, but I can't draw, I don't know how to make GIFs. All they really do here is just make video essays. But one of my New Year's resolutions was to find a way to give back to this community that's been so great, so I thought I'd do a video on what we can learn from the Critical Role cast as writers, as players, and as artists about how to make such memorable characters. Because the process of playing a character is synonymous with characterization, D&D is prone to have a lot of characters start as tropes, much like first drafts. And Critical Role is the same way, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Tropes exist to give us templates for great characters. They're not inherently bad, they just need to grow past them. And that growth is what we're looking at today. And to start, I thought I'd use Mollymauk Tealeaf because, major spoilers, please click away now if you don't know, he dies in episode 26. And even though his arc wasn't finished, I think he's such a well sketched out character that we got just enough time to see who he was and why he did the things he did for us to understand, why he's a good, great character. And specifically, I think he does something that I see very few writers tackle, which is self-contradiction. See, everything about Molly was contradiction, or, at very least subversion. He himself has no idea what his past was, but unlike amnesia arcs normally entail, he wasn't the least bit interested in it. He and the rest of the Mighty Nine were robbed, or at least attempted to be, and instead he educated and gave them all gold. And when faced with blatant discrimination by the High Richter, he felt no remorse and apologized. And even in death, his eyes remained open. This is what I'm talking about. These types of actions normally lead characters down paths of revenge and fuel motivations, but with Molly, I think Taliesin did something truly special in denying those traditional characterizations to create something new. I'm not the first to say that Molly borderline hedonistic, and his whole motivation resided in the now. No qualms with the past, no plans for the future, just the present. And in that, his character became all about living in the present and adapting himself to the new incoming information and changing how he acted on the fly. Which I remember in all my creative writing classes, someone would always say a character isn't acting consistent, or they were afraid of a character acting too different, or whatever. And I always remember thinking that was weird because people act different in varying scenarios. People live in the dichotomy of reality, and thus act self-contradictory all the time. So why shouldn't our characters? I think that's the beauty of Molly as a character. He embraced that dichotomy because he has no regard for the past. It meant that Taliesin could always act in a way that felt true to Molly's core. That core being, leave every place better than how you found it. And that alone would make Molly a good character. But remember, stories are hardly ever just about one character. D&D especially is about a group of people growing and changing together. And it's here where Molly's character goes from good to great. Molly's approach and lifestyle challenged the other members of the Mighty Nine, and normally when you say a character is challenged, you normally think villains, or anti-heroes, some type of antagonistic role. Well, Molly wasn't that. Molly was a friend who encouraged and provoked the other members of the Mighty Nine to understand themselves a bit better. He challenged Not to understand that stealing is perfectly fine, but maybe you shouldn't steal from happy people. A smaller gesture, but Molly kissing Caleb when his trauma had left him motionless, that despite what he thinks, Caleb's still worthy of love. And helping Bo to understand that with her withdrawn and abrasive disposition is valuable, but still worth dropping every now and then. And I could keep going, but I hope you're beginning to see my point. As a foil to the rest of the party, Molly helped reinforce the duality of Mighty Nine's actions, for better or for worse, helping them realize aspects of themselves that they were previously blind to, allowing them to reflect on themselves through their interactions with him. And in D&D, which is essentially just an ensemble cast show, having a character that brings out the duality and complexity of not only himself, but his companions is no easy feat, and Taliesin did this exact thing so well with Molly. The best way I've begun to understand Molly and characters like him is that they're nothing you want, but everything you need. It doesn't sound like it makes sense, but it sure seems fitting for him. None of the Mighty Nine wanted to be called out on their bullshit, but they needed to be in order to grow. And hell, you could even say that about his death. none of the characters, let alone the players, wanted Molly to die, but from an overarching story, they needed something to truly anchor them all together. And in that way, Molly left them with just another layer of complexity. Which is why it's weird to me that I see a lot of discourse around Molly of people saying that he was a flat character or something to that extent. I think a round static character is a better definition. Molly wasn't going to change, and even Taliesin knew that. He said the purpose of a character like Molly was to impact the world around him. And that doesn't make him any less deep than the other members of the Mighty Nine, because, you know, what we already talked about. That doesn't mean you have to like him, but, you know, the thought and artistic intent that went into his creation still deserves a lot of merit. As does his legacy. As people have said that he felt like the only fitting character to die when he did, but honestly, I'd attribute that narrative satisfaction to the entire cast of Critical Role. As anyone who plays D&D knows, you don't plan for anything, you can only roll with what happens during the game. And it's because of the masterful improv and care that goes into their game that allows them to digest what happens and then try to craft a meaningful story with just what's given to them. But mini tangent aside, Molly's great. I loved him, and I think we, as writers, creators, artists, should take notes about contradiction and duality from Taliesin and Molly, because in treating your characters like real people is how you get hundreds of thousands of people to love and adore something that just started as an idea in your head. And this isn't even getting into the fantastic forms of representation he was, which is super important, but you know, there are more fitting people than me talking about that right now. You really should go check them out. I linked them in this description box because they're very heartwarming to read. But for now, that's all I got. I hope this works as a community contribution because I see so many people contributing masterpieces daily that this was a little daunting. But I hope I can do one for each of the characters, and I'm really hoping I get a chance to check out the art show sometimes when this video goes up. But for now, thank you for watching and sharing, and I'll see you next time.